What is the meaning of life? What are good and evil? What is justice? These are some of the big questions philosophers have been asking for a long time. Philosophy can seem complicated, but it's really about exploring important ideas that help us understand the world and ourselves. Here are 10 basic philosophical concepts everyone should know, no matter their background. 1. Plato's theory of ideas. Plato's theory of ideas, also known as the theory of forms, is a cornerstone of Western philosophy. Plato, a student of Socrates and the teacher of Aristotle, lived in ancient Greece during a time of significant intellectual development. Plato's theory says that there is a distinction between the physical world and a higher realm of reality, which he referred to as the world of ideas or forms. According to Plato, the physical world that we perceive through our senses is not the true reality. It is merely a shadow or imitation of the true, perfect forms that exist in the realm of ideas. For instance, when we see a beautiful object, that object is beautiful because it participates in the form of beauty. However, the form of beauty itself is a perfect, immutable concept that exists independently of any particular beautiful object. This theory is famously illustrated in Plato's allegory of the cave, found in his work The Republic. In this allegory, Plato describes a group of people who have lived chained to the wall of a cave all their lives, facing a blank wall. The people watch shadows projected on the wall by things passing in front of a fire behind them, and they begin to assign forms to these shadows, believing them to be the most real things in the world. However, one prisoner is freed and comes to realize that the shadows on the wall are not reality at all. He discovers the outside world, which is the source of the shadows, and sees things as they truly are. This story symbolizes the philosopher's journey from ignorance to enlightenment and the realization of the true nature of reality. Plato's theory of ideas has had a profound influence on various fields, including metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. It raises important questions about the nature of reality, knowledge, and the good life. Number 2, introspection. Introspection is the examination of one's own conscious thoughts and feelings. In philosophy, introspection is a method used to gain insight into the mind and its processes. This concept has been central to philosophical inquiry, particularly in the realms of epistemology and psychology. The concept of introspection was notably advanced by John Locke, a 17th century English philosopher. Locke argued that all knowledge comes from experience, which he divided into two categories: sensation and reflection. Sensation involves the perception of external objects through the senses, while reflection refers to the mind's examination of its own operations. According to Locke, introspection allows us to observe our thoughts, emotions, and desires, leading to self-knowledge. Locke's ideas were influenced by the earlier work of René Descartes, who famously declared, "Cogito ergo sum," I think, therefore I am. Descartes believed that introspection provided the foundation for all knowledge. He argued that while we can doubt the existence of the external world, we cannot doubt the existence of our own thoughts. This led Descartes to conclude that the mind is more certain than the body, laying the groundwork for his dualist theory of mind and body. Introspection has also been a central method in psychology, particularly in the study of consciousness. Wilhelm Wundt, often considered the father of modern psychology, used introspection as a method to study the basic elements of consciousness. His approach, known as structuralism, sought to analyze the mind by breaking it down into its simplest components, such as sensations, images, and feelings. However, introspection has faced criticism, particularly from behaviorists, who argue that it is subjective and unreliable. Behaviorists like John B. Watson and B.F. Skinner dismissed introspection as unscientific, arguing that psychology should focus on observable behavior rather than the unobservable mind. Despite these criticisms, introspection remains an important tool for understanding the mind and continues to be used in various philosophical and psychological contexts. Number 3, solipsism. Solipsism is the philosophical idea that only one's own mind is sure to exist. This concept raises profound questions about the nature of reality and the limits of human knowledge. The term solipsism comes from the Latin words solus, meaning alone, and ipse, meaning self. Solipsism suggests that everything outside of one's own consciousness is uncertain. According to this view, the external world, other people, and even one's own body may not exist independently of one's mind and are mere projections or illusions. One of the most famous expressions of solipsism is found in the work of René Descartes. In his Meditations on First Philosophy, Descartes engages in a process of radical doubt, questioning everything he believes to be true. He arrives at the conclusion that while he can doubt the existence of the external world, he cannot doubt the existence of his own thoughts. This leads him to his famous dictum, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Solipsism is often considered an extreme form of skepticism, which questions the possibility of knowing anything with certainty. It challenges the assumption that we can have direct knowledge of the external world, other minds, or even our own bodies. Solipsism also raises ethical and existential questions. If only my mind is real, what does that mean for my relationships with others? How should I live in a world where nothing outside of my mind is certain? While few philosophers have embraced solipsism as a practical worldview, it remains an important concept in philosophy. It serves as a reminder of the difficulties inherent in the quest for knowledge and the need for humility in our understanding of the world. Number 4, theodicy. Theodicy is the attempt to reconcile the existence of an all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good God with the presence of evil and suffering in the world. The term theodicy was coined by the German philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz in the 18th century, but the problem it addresses has been a central concern of religious philosophy for centuries. The problem of evil is one of the most challenging issues in the philosophy of religion. If God is all-powerful, he should be able to prevent evil. If God is all-good, he should want to prevent evil. Yet, evil exists. This apparent contradiction has led many to question the existence of God or to seek explanations for how such a being could allow evil to exist. Leibniz's theodicy attempts to resolve this problem by arguing that the world we live in is the best of all possible worlds. According to Leibniz, God, in his infinite wisdom, created a world that balances the greatest possible good with the least possible evil. While we may not understand why certain evils exist, Leibniz suggests that they are necessary for the overall harmony and balance of the universe. The presence of evil is not a flaw in God's creation, but a necessary part of the best possible world. Other philosophers have offered different approaches to theodicy. For example, the free will defense argues that God gave humans free will, and that the existence of evil is a consequence of human freedom. Free will is a greater good that justifies the existence of evil, as it allows for genuine moral choices and the development of virtue. While no single theodicy has been universally accepted, the ongoing debate over the problem of evil continues to be a vital area of philosophical inquiry. Number 5, moral relativism. Moral relativism is the view that moral judgments and values are not absolute, but are relative to the cultural, historical, or personal context in which they are made. According to moral relativism, what is considered right or wrong can vary depending on the situation, culture, or individual beliefs. Moral relativism contrasts with moral absolutism, which holds that there are universal moral principles that apply to all people at all times. Moral relativists argue that different cultures have different moral codes, and that it is not possible to judge one culture's morality by the standards of another. Practices like polygamy, arranged marriages, or ritual sacrifices might be morally acceptable in one culture but condemned in another. The idea of moral relativism has its roots in ancient philosophy, particularly in the work of the Greek sophists, who argued that moral truths are subjective and dependent on individual perspective. However, moral relativism became more prominent in the 20th century, particularly with the rise of cultural anthropology and the recognition of the diversity of moral practices around the world. One of the key arguments for moral relativism is the observation of cultural diversity. Anthropologists like Franz Boas and Ruth Benedict documented the wide range of moral beliefs and practices across different societies, challenging the idea that there is a single objective moral standard. They argued that moral norms are shaped by cultural, social, and historical factors, and that it is not possible to judge one culture's morality by the standards of another. Critics of moral relativism argue that it leads to moral nihilism, the belief that there are no moral values or that all moral values are equally valid. They argue that moral relativism makes it difficult to criticize harmful practices such as slavery, genocide, or discrimination because it denies the possibility of universal moral principles. Despite these criticisms, moral relativism remains an influential perspective in philosophy and ethics. Number 6, categorical imperative. The categorical imperative is a key concept in the ethical philosophy of Immanuel Kant, an 18th century German philosopher. Kant's moral philosophy, known as deontological ethics, is based on the idea that moral actions are determined by duty and that there are universal moral laws that apply to all rational beings. The categorical imperative is Kant's formulation of the moral law. It is a principle that commands us to act in a way that could be universally applied to all people in all situations. In other words, before you act, you should consider whether the principle underlying your action could be adopted as a universal law that everyone could follow. Kant formulated the categorical imperative in several different ways, but the most famous formulation is, act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. This means that when you are deciding what to do, you should ask yourself whether you would want everyone else to do the same thing in similar circumstances. If the answer is yes, then the action is morally permissible. If the answer is no, then the action is morally wrong. For example, consider the act of lying. If you were to lie to someone, you would need to consider whether you think that everyone else should lie in similar situations. According to Kant, if everyone lied, trust would be impossible, and communication would break down. Therefore, lying cannot be a universal law, and it is morally wrong. Another formulation of the categorical imperative is, act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never merely as a means, but always at the same time as an end. This means that we should always treat others as valuable in themselves, rather than as tools or means to achieve our own goals. This principle emphasizes the inherent dignity and worth of every individual. Kant's categorical imperative has been highly influential in the development of modern ethical theory. It provides a framework for evaluating moral actions based on principles of duty and universalizability, rather than on consequences or personal preferences. However, Kant's ethics have also faced criticism, particularly for their perceived rigidity and for the difficulty of applying the categorical imperative in complex moral situations. Number 7, determinism. Determinism is the philosophical view that every event or state of affairs, including human actions, is determined by preceding events in accordance with the laws of nature. It suggests that everything in the universe, including human behavior, follows a set of predetermined rules, leaving no room for free will or randomness. The concept of determinism has ancient roots, with early discussions found in the works of the Greek philosophers Leucippus and Democritus, who proposed that everything in the universe is composed of atoms moving in a void, and that all events are the result of their interactions. This early form of determinism laid the groundwork for later developments in both philosophy and science. In the 17th century, determinism became closely associated with the rise of modern science, particularly with the work of Isaac Newton. Newton's laws of motion and universal gravitation suggested that the universe operates according to predictable and unchanging physical laws. This deterministic view of the universe implied that if we had complete knowledge of the initial conditions of a system, we could, in principle, predict all future events. Determinism raises profound questions about free will and moral responsibility. If all our actions are determined by prior causes, can we truly be held responsible for them? This question has been central to debates in both philosophy and theology. One response to the problem of free will in a deterministic universe is compatibilism, the view that free will and determinism are not mutually exclusive. Compatibilists argue that free will can be understood as the ability to act according to one's desires and intentions, even if those desires and intentions are themselves determined by prior causes. According to this view, we can still be held morally responsible for our actions, even in a deterministic universe, because our actions reflect our character and values. On the other hand, incompatibilists, including many libertarians, argue that true free will requires the ability to act independently of deterministic causes. They believe that if our actions are determined, we cannot be truly free or morally responsible. The debate over determinism continues to be a central issue in philosophy, particularly in discussions of free will, moral responsibility, and the nature of human agency. Number 8, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am, is a philosophical statement made by René Descartes, a 17th century French philosopher, mathematician, and scientist. This statement is one of the most famous in the history of philosophy and is considered the foundation of modern Western philosophy. Since doubt is a form of thinking, and thinking requires a thinker, Descartes concluded that he must exist as a thinking being. Thus, the statement, I think, therefore I am, became the first principle of his philosophy. Descartes believed that this statement provided a secure starting point for building a system of knowledge. From this foundation, he sought to establish the existence of God, the immortality of the soul, and the reality of the external world. His emphasis on the thinking self as the foundation of knowledge marked a shift from medieval philosophy, which was primarily concerned with the existence of God and the nature of the universe, to modern philosophy, which focuses on the nature of human consciousness and the limits of human knowledge. His ideas laid the groundwork for the development of rationalism, the view that reason is the primary source of knowledge, and influenced later philosophers, including Immanuel Kant and David Hume. He has also faced criticism. Some philosophers, such as Friedrich Nietzsche and Martin Heidegger, have argued that Descartes' focus on the isolated, thinking self leads to a problematic separation between the self and the world. They suggest that this dualism overlooks the interconnectedness of human existence and the importance of embodiment and social relations. Despite these criticisms, it remains a central concept in philosophy, symbolizing the quest for certainty and the emphasis on the individual as the foundation of knowledge. Number 9, God is dead. God is dead is a famous statement made by the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche in the 19th century. Nietzsche's declaration is not a literal claim about the death of a deity, but rather a metaphorical expression of the decline of traditional religious beliefs and the rise of secularism in modern society. Nietzsche first introduced the idea in his work The Gay Science, and later expanded on it in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. He argued that the Enlightenment, with its emphasis on reason, science, and individualism, had led to the erosion of religious faith and the authority of the Christian God. In Nietzsche's view, the death of God signaled the end of a moral framework that had dominated Western civilization for centuries. Nietzsche saw the death of God as both a crisis and an opportunity. On the one hand, he believed that the collapse of traditional religious values would lead to nihilism, the belief that life is meaningless and that there are no objective moral truths. Without God, Nietzsche argued, there would be no foundation for morality, leading to a sense of despair and purposelessness. Nietzsche also saw the death of God as an opportunity for the creation of new values and a new way of living. He believed that individuals could overcome the nihilism brought about by the death of God by embracing their own creative potential and striving to become overmen or supermen, Übermensch. For Nietzsche, the overman is an individual who creates his own values and lives life with a sense of purpose and passion, free from the constraints of traditional morality. Nietzsche's declaration that God is dead has had a profound influence on modern philosophy, particularly in existentialism and postmodernism. It has inspired thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre, Martin Heidegger, and Michel Foucault, who have explored the implications of the decline of traditional religious and moral values in the modern world. However, Nietzsche's ideas have also been controversial and widely debated. Some critics argue that Nietzsche's rejection of traditional morality leads to moral relativism and the potential for chaos. Others have questioned whether Nietzsche's vision of the overman is achievable or desirable. Despite these debates, Nietzsche's declaration that God is dead remains a powerful symbol of the challenges and opportunities of modernity, and it continues to resonate in contemporary discussions of religion, morality, and the meaning of life. Number 10, existential crisis. An existential crisis is a period of intense questioning and doubt about the meaning and purpose of life. It often arises when individuals confront fundamental questions about their existence, such as, why am I here? What is the meaning of life? And what happens after death? These questions can lead to feelings of anxiety, despair, and a sense of purposelessness. The concept of an existential crisis is closely associated with existentialism, a philosophical movement that emerged in the 19th and 20th centuries. Existentialist philosophers, such as Søren Kierkegaard, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Albert Camus, explored the human experience of anxiety, freedom, and the search for meaning in a seemingly indifferent or absurd world. Kierkegaard, often considered the father of existentialism, described the experience of angst or dread as a fundamental aspect of human existence. He argued that this anxiety arises from the awareness of our own freedom and the responsibility to make meaningful choices in a world without inherent meaning. Sartre, a leading figure in existentialism, famously declared that existence precedes essence, meaning that human beings are not born with a predetermined purpose or essence. Instead, we must create our own meaning through our choices and actions. Sartre believed that this freedom to choose is both exhilarating and terrifying, leading to the possibility of an existential crisis. Camus, in his essay *The Myth of Sisyphus*, described the human condition as inherently absurd, as we are driven to seek meaning in a universe that offers none. He argued that the recognition of this absurdity can lead to a crisis of meaning, but also to a sense of liberation. For Camus, the challenge is to live authentically and to create meaning in the face of the absurd. Existential crises are not limited to philosophical discussions. They are common experiences in everyday life. People may experience an existential crisis during significant life events, such as the death of a loved one, a career change, a divorce, or a major life transition. These crises often prompt individuals to reevaluate their beliefs, values, and goals, leading to personal growth and transformation. While an existential crisis can be a painful and disorienting experience, it can also be an opportunity for self-discovery and the development of a more authentic and meaningful life. Many people find that facing the challenges of an existential crisis ultimately leads to a deeper understanding of themselves and a renewed sense of purpose. Hey there, YouTube fans! Do you want access to amazing content? Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Stay updated with all our latest videos. Join our community of awesome subscribers. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.